but I want to talk about climate change. I want to talk about if we really are on borrowed time. Are there only 11 months left to go? The science is proved. We don't need to talk about the science anymore.
Yes.
Now, Piers, are you a scientist?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm a physicist. I got a first-class degree in physics from Imperial College, and I got an MSc in astrophysics. And I've done a lot of research into climate, the weather, and we do long-range weather forecasting. I'm also a meteorologist.
So why are you so unpopular?
Well, because they are peddling something which is untrue, and they do not have an answer.
We must be polluting the planet, Piers.
Well,
I mean, from everything we do, just existing.
Pollution is one thing, and climate change is something. Man-made climate change does not exist.
But not even with all the cars and the trains and the planes and the...
Carbon dioxide levels are an effect, not a cause of climate.
I mean,
Climates
it
have
must
always
be changing.
changed.
Yeah.
For millions of years, climates have changed, and the CO2 levels follow temperatures. And the cause of the climate is basically sea temperatures and the way the jet stream
doing
operates.
something. I mean, the amount of cars on the roads now, there must be some problem.
Well,
surely.
we're making a little bit more CO2, which is actually making plants grow faster. But the reason CO2 is the gas of life, and we want more, not less. Millions of years ago, there was a lot more CO2.
I don't know what you think
We
out
want
there
more
who are
CO2,
listening or
not
watching
less.
us tonight. More CO2. I mean, don't you
We
know?
want more CO2.
Yeah, right.
If you
fine.
double CO2 levels, plants will increase their growth rate by 40%.
Let's see what our viewers
That'll be
and
a
listeners-
boom for agriculture.
Okay, well,
and that's what farmers do. Tomato farmers put CO2 in the greenhouses to make the tomatoes grow faster.
97% of the world's leading climate experts all agree that global warming is happening because
that
of...
is a falsity as well.
No, I think what
The
you're saying is
answer
a
to
falsity.
that percentage is 0.3% of the
Where's
scientists
that
that
fact
wrote
come
a box
from?
of scientific papers. 0.3% of them said that they believed or understood that man was
Okay,
more
here's
than
here's
was
the
responsible for 50% of warming. The rest said nothing at all.
91% of scientists think this, 96% of scientists
it's
think that.
untrue, and
No, but when did science ever become a consensus thing?
Hooray!
It's not faith-based.
Excellent,
You know, it's
excellent.
not the great new religion.
No.
You know, it's either science fact or it's science fiction. It's either right or wrong.
Ricky would like to say
When it comes to
something.
NASA,
Ricky
I
the
would trust
Remainer.
NASA with my life to get me to space.
Would
But the
you?
only people... Yes, I would. You wouldn't
A
go
lot of
anywhere
them
else.
died on the way. You know
You
that.
trust science for when it comes to medicine, travelling around
Yeah.
the world, going to space, and yet suddenly when it comes to climate, 97% of scientists say one thing and Piers Corbyn says another.
No, 97% don't say that. I've already told you. It's
I know you have, and I think
0.3%.
that's wrong.
Ricky,
There's a
You're
scientific
That's not
paper
true.
published which rips apart the paper, so-called, that you are talking. Look, it's a media construct. It's made up by the globalist media, which is making 24/7 propaganda for the
All right.
globalists.
Ricky,
to
concentrate
control
on
you.
social media for a moment.
Climate change
Piers, just a
policies
minute.
control you.
I want
not
to find
climate.
out what the European Union are going to do about this. Ben.
Well, the European Union are terrible on climate change. They don't have any joint-up thinking at all. So, for example, we get back in this country £3 billion towards common agricultural policy per annum. In fact, that money would be much better spent, whether or not you believe in anthropomorphic climate change, that money would be much better spent reforesting, for example, you know, where there's a demonstrable creation of oxygen. So the European Union is terrific at grandstanding and banging the drum and saying, you know, we believe in environmentally sustainable solutions to everything. But actually, when it comes down to it, they're not really that good at it.
Piers has just whispered, yeah, reforesting's a good
Yes,
idea, very
look,
good idea.
You could plant loads more trees to remove man's CO2. And we're completely in favour of that. If you're worried about man's CO2, plant trees. But stop, you know, don't stop people flying. Don't stop people eating meat. Plant trees. However, what will happen if you plant lots of trees and gobble up the CO2, when the CO2 trees die, they produce CO2. So you'll have to grab the trees and drop them in a crevasse or something. But okay, you could do that. However, the sea will respond by just giving out more CO2. So
Why-
the sea rules.
Why-
There's 50 times more CO2 in the sea than in the land.
Right.
So you can't win. You can't win against the sea.
Why are we not, as a planet, doing something to make ourselves ready for the eventual climate change, which, if we look back through history, has always happened?
It has always happened, and the climate change coming is cooling. And the jet stream has shifted further south in the northern hemisphere, so we're getting more extremes. We're getting some very extreme cold winters and some short hot spells in summers, which are all part of the wild jet stream, which is an effect of the very low solar activity we're in. And this autumn and winter, there's going to be a lot of snow in Britain and in Western Europe, and the climate change science deniers, these are Extinction Rebellion, will want to deny it snowing, I dare say, but it is going to snow, and we predicted it because we understand how the climate works, whereas they don't.
It's climate change and it's getting extreme, and that's what people are saying.
I preferred this discussion when it was the dear old Ecology Party, because it was stripped away and not politicised. And so when Jonathan Porritt used to rock up on television with 2% of the vote, it was the Ecology Party, and it was, as you described, recycling. Think about what you're doing to the environment. And that's what I appreciate. I am an ecologist. I do believe in not buying the chocolate eclairs with the sort of moulded plastic.
Have you stopped eating meat?
No, but that's
Well,
a completely
you should.
separate issue.
No,
No, but that's the problem. This is where it becomes politicised. When we have this baggage on top where they call it climate change and saving the world and the terrible Extinction Rebellion traffic mob, you know, that is a turn-off for me, and that is not ecology. But when I go into the supermarket, yes, I don't want to use bags. I want to use recyclable things.
Right.
I believe in ecology, not the kind of periphery around
All right,
it.
Alice, tell me about your thoughts, because you've been quite outspoken about this, but you are exactly the right age to be concerned about how we treat the planet.
Well, I am an environmentalist, and I do believe it is our duty to protect and care for our Earth for future generations. But I believe this climate alarmism, which is peddled endlessly in schools and in all sorts of institutions, is doing nothing but harm. Instead, it's creating anxiety in young children, and I believe it's a form of child abuse. I've seen videos where children are hysterical and crying over this, believing that the world is going to end, when really that is not the case.
We are messing the world up, though, aren't we? I mean, we are, we're pouring out pollutants all over the world. We have overpopulated the planet. We are doing some harm.
I don't believe it's the people who are doing harm. I believe it's the mega corporations, the big money multinationals, which are really destroying the Earth. And this climate change emergency is being used to divert our attention from these real problems that we face, such as plastic pollution or the deforestation of the Amazon. There is a big problem, and it's not going to be solved by giving our tax money to the EU or to the government. That's only going to transfer wealth from the poor people of this nation and the hard-working, ordinary taxpayers, again, to the establishment and to the government and to the elite. So,
Ben, what do you think about it?
Well, I think Alice is spot on. A lot of the steps taken by government to address the issue manifest themselves eventually in taxes one way or another, and those taxes effectively hit the poorest the most, and they hit businesses, and they're very regressive. So I'm completely with Jonny. We need to take a kind of ecologist's pragmatic view, switch the lights off, don't use unnecessary plastic, conserve energy. It's all good for your back pocket. Just be normal and get on with it. And the other thing I agree with Alice on is that this alarmist thing is self-defeating. Because if you think the whole planet's going to come to a halt in 10 years' time, you won't bother actually trying to do anything to save the planet. You're just going to give up, throw your hands up in horror and think, well, the whole thing's a disaster, and do nothing. And I think we need a much more measured approach. And the last thing I'd like to say is that actually, it's not the United Kingdom that's the biggest polluter on this planet. The biggest polluters are China, India, and of course the US.
So a lot of people talking about pollution, which is good. And Lincoln Hawke has just said it's arrogant to think that we can do anything about climate change, which I think he is absolutely incorrect. We've got 11 months to save the world, and I'm going to start as soon as I get home.
We are all carbon, are we not? This is a carbon-based planet.
You believe it or not, in the IPCC documents from some years ago, they said we need something to control people, and climate alarmism will help us do it.
Do we have any proof of this?
Yes.
Sounds like a mad conspiracy.
Yeah. No, it's not.
Absolute
No.
madness.
Is there anywhere we could go online and look it up? And I'll get Ricky the Remainer, who's very good at that, to do it now.
Go on to weatheraction.com.
I'm not going onto your website.
No, okay.
No, I'm not going on your website.
Well, okay, weatheraction.com. No. But we go into one of our presentations there and go through it.
But I'm not brave enough to come out against climate change. I'd love to believe what Piers is saying, but I do think that whether or not anthropomorphic climate change, carbon-based climate change is true is kind of academic. We should be ecologically orientated. We mustn't panic. We should put in policies which are sensible and create a genuinely sustainable basis on which this planet can go forward with confidence. Remove the anxiety that clearly the younger generation is experiencing.
Well,
Honestly.
KNM84, this is still on climate change. He says you're more likely to be stabbed to death than be a victim of climate change, which is interesting because as the glaciers continue to melt and more of the world becomes flooded, they will be. They will be flooded, and more people
Jacob's
will
Harvard
die.
Glacier, the biggest and most important glacier in the world in Greenland, is getting longer.
That's
as we
not true,
speak.
is it?
Hang on,
That's
hang
not
on.
true.
You just, what do you mean not true?
Because
have you got proof?
Yes,
have you
because
got proof?
Yes, I have,
Go to space, go into a satellite, look at what
if
NASA are
you'll
looking
pay,
at,
I'll go,
and
yeah.
you'll see that the glaciers and that the Antarctic ice, they're shrinking. It's gone
hang
down by
on. That's untrue.
40%.
Hold on!
Untrue.
I am now confused. One of you is not telling the truth. Is it getting bigger or is it getting smaller?
Well,
Who do I
I'm
believe?
going to go with the 97% of scientists.
No, it's no 97% of scientists.
Yes,
Here's
there
a
are.
graph, there's a map here. This is IPCC data showing
Back
that
to
the
your website.
Arctic has actually got bigger, the ice in the Arctic over the last 10 years or so.
That
This
is
is-
Or actually
nonsense.
6 years, I think.
hang- hang-
2012, 2019.
Hang on, let me have a look.
7 years.
Right, okay. So that's 2019, that's 2012.
Yeah.
He
That
will
comes
know.
from truthixites.com and friends of mine.
But I
in
can
that
see that
Manchester.
you've put a different number over the top of it. Can we get a close-up on this, where it's a different font over the top? I don't know if you can see this, but there's clearly... Piers has put his
If you're
own
listening on
font
the radio,
top
you
of
will
it.
have to go to social media
Absolute
and have a
nonsense.
look.
What's he on about? I didn't produce this graph, but
People may not know this, but your brother is leader of the Labour Party, and possibly the next Prime
Possibly
Minister.
the next Prime Minister. I hope so.
What is he going to do about Brexit? Because nobody is particularly sure.
Well, look, I can't speak for my brother, but he carry out Labour Party policy. But I do know that whatever happens, if we're in or out after October the 31st, there's going to have to be ongoing negotiations with the European Union. And Jeremy Corbyn, my brother, will be the best to do that because he'll speak for the many rather than the few, which is what Boris Johnson would do. Even though Boris Johnson agrees with me on climate change,
Now-
or he did before he became Prime Minister.
Well, what will he do about climate change?
Well, I don't know because he's got to follow Labour Party policy. However, let's be clear, the Climate Change Act of 2008 says that as the science changes, the measures will change. Now, the science has changed because we know the jet stream has come further south. We're getting more of these extremely cold winters and also more short hot spells, which are all part of low solar
Will
activity.
he put you perhaps in as a position of government advisor to
I-
Prime Minister Corbyn?
I don't know. If he wants advice from me, I'm always happy to offer it. But look, he has to run his own ship.
Yes. We're told that young people all want to remain in the European Union, as, because I'm a young person, I did to begin this 3-year debacle, and I've changed my mind for all kinds of reasons.
Well, I think the majority of young people do support Remain just purely because of the amount of propaganda and, teachers and parents too, especially in London.
conspiracy.
But
When we
But,
want the voice
I
of
have
the
found,
Remainer, we'll
no.
come to you, Ricky.
But personally, through my activism, my pro-Brexit activism, I found a lot of young people who do support Leave, and I've been getting lots of messages on social media, other young people saying, thank you for standing up for Brexit, and I can't come out as a Brexiteer in my school because I would be harassed, but I really appreciate what you're doing.
What would you
so,
do in the future? Do you think you would consider becoming a politician or not?
Not really. I
Why
would
not?
love to be a barrister, really.
Johnny.
Yes, James.
The Liberal Democrats. They could win the next election. Joe Swinson could be the next Prime Minister of this country. And actually, considering the first female Prime Minister of this country was probably, in my view anyway, and you may differ, the best Prime Minister we've had for a considerable amount of time.
Yes.
The sainted Margaret.
That's right.
Maybe Joe Swinson would do a good job.
Well, in Margaret Thatcher's words, no. No, they are the illiberal undemocrats. We voted, I'm going to say the same old things you always hear on the telly and the radio, 74 million, etc. And they are denying the once-in-a-generation referendum, which they got beaten on. And okay, they have got their voice, and there will be, 6 or 7 million people that may vote for them. It will split the Labour vote. Who are Labour? I don't know. Oh, they're nice. I don't know what I am. Oh, it's all confusing.
What?
And so, no, but like the Labour vote will
there
be
a nurse
confused.
standing by?
But this is the thing about the hard left takeover of the Labour Party. They're split down the middle in terms of Remain or Leave, and their idea, their coalition, which is of Northern Leavers and Metropolitan Tready Remainers, as some kind of coalition, is a bit like Silk Cut cigarette sponsorships back in the 1980s, where they sponsored rugby league in the north and show jumping in the south. No chance.
But Jo Swinson, she's less liberal than Maggie Thatcher was. Maggie Thatcher would be closer to liberal than Jo Swinson. She is the dictatorial side of Remain. It absolutely baffles me that without at least a second referendum, not that I'm advocating one, but at least not even with a second referendum, she now advocates to revoke Article 50.
But if we could get an election, which we were offered, and politicians turned it down, your brother didn't like the idea. If we'd had the election, we could have chosen who we wanted to vote for. And if everybody had gone out and voted for the Lib Dems, we would have known that they were in the right.
But she declined to have an election. And her MEPs, by the way, in Parliament a couple of days ago, accused Boris Johnson of being a dictator. Well, actually, dictators don't offer elections, and it was the Lib Dems that blocked it, along, I'm afraid to say, with your brother and his party. And
the Tories are trying to let themselves off the hook, weren't they? I mean, Brexit should be sorted first. Then we can have an election on sensible things about where the country's going. For the economy, what are we doing with Britain? What the distribution of wealth, is it going to go more up or more down? I mean, what are we going to do?
Leave WTO terms on the 31st of October.
Brexit.
And then we can have an election.
But isn't that going to ruin the country if we
No.
leave on WTO
Look,
rules?
their biggest fear of Remainers, the biggest fear of the people that say no to no deal when they really mean where they're opposed to Brexit. Their biggest fear is when we leave, they're going to be caught out because nothing will happen at all.
No.
In the day one will be no change.